So today we conclude our short series on recovering ourselves in order to recover the world with a discussion of what we as individuals can do to solve humanity's greatest problems. The answers may be unexpected, but I encourage listeners to keep an open mind, as an open mind invites possibilities. In times of political upheaval and social disintegration, the temptation is strong to rage, despair, or withdraw. Figures such as Donald Trump, who embody and promote selfishness, division, and disregard for social norms, do more than shape policy. They shape our sense of collective well-being. Their rhetoric normalizes cynicism and mistrust, erodes social cohesion, and fosters societal disintegration. Trumpism, therefore, is both a symptom and a cause of declining happiness in Western societies. Yet despair is not our only option. In fact, our very capacity for happiness is the most powerful source of strength, from which those who hold illegitimate power would shield us. This concealment of our source of true power diminishes our belief that we can do anything at all, which leads to a vicious cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy. Happiness, or subjective well-being, is a surprisingly reliable measure across countries of collective mental health and other societal factors. Using happiness as our guide and investing in our own mental health, we are not only improving our personal lives, but contributing to healthier communities and raising our ability to resist the corrosive effects of what I would call the politics of misery. Only from a place of genuine mental health can we rebuild a foundation of trust, resilience, and compassion, away from paranoid politics. An informed public is a powerful public. In this case, the greatest power comes from being informed about mental health and putting it into practice. Cultivating one's mental health and awareness not only benefits the self, it generates ripple effects that strengthen society. In this sense, individual well-being is a civic responsibility. The path forward is both inward and outward, raising the level of resilience within ourselves, fostering genuine connections with those around us, and channeling our energy into collective acts of generosity and trust building. Once we recognize authoritarianism as a drive by unfit so-called leaders to spread their own misery, which is why they needed to seize their positions in the first place, they will lose their grip on the population. A population's ability to trust one another, to trust ourselves, and to develop true cohesion is the greatest antidote to authoritarian conquest and domination. The first step in defending against a culture of mistrust is to stabilize our inner lives. Mental health begins with recognition, as Stoic philosopher Epictetus articulated, that while we cannot always control external events, we can control how we respond to them. Modern psychotherapy echoes this principle. Practices such as cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and insight-oriented approaches all help individuals recognize the power of perspective. In practice, this means cultivating inner resources and resilience through mental hygiene. Mindfulness meditation, for example, trains attention away from reactive anger toward grounded awareness. Journaling, engaging in activities that bring joy, gratitude exercises, or even the simple discipline of pausing before responding can protect the mind from the spirals of fear and outrage that authoritarian leaders thrive on. Habits that reinforce psychological flexibility and stability, far from being irrelevant to societal affairs, are the very fabric of an integrative and cohesive society. Equally important is attending to the physical foundations of mental health. Adequate sleep, balanced nutrition, regular exercise, and time in nature all support the capacity for emotional regulation. These practices are not trivial. They're not egocentric acts, but fortifications against manipulation that enable individuals and ultimately the population to resist propaganda and fear-mongering. A society of citizens who are in touch with their sources of joy and who maintain their sense of happiness is far less susceptible to these so-called leaders who capitalize on chaos and whose primary goal is to spread their own misery. If inner resilience provides the groundwork, social connection builds the walls of collective defense. Social isolation is both a driver and consequence of unhappiness. By 2023, 1 in 4 Americans reported eating every meal alone. The rise of loneliness correlates with declining trust in institutions and fellow citizens, leaving people vulnerable to the politics of fear. Reversing this trend begins with small, intentional acts of connection. Sharing meals, organizing neighborhood gatherings, volunteering, or even initiating friendly conversations with strangers fosters a sense of belonging. These interactions matter not only because they make individuals feel happier, but also because they build the social fabric that demagogues work to unravel. The research bears this out. Studies consistently show that social support is among the strongest predictors of both mental health and physical longevity. Communities with higher trust report lower levels of anxiety and depression. Importantly, they also resist authoritarian politics more effectively. Every shared meal, every act of kindness, and every reinforcement of our oneness becomes a form of democratic resistance. Furthermore, correcting distorted perceptions of mistrust is crucial. Experiments such as that with lost wallets demonstrate that people are far more trustworthy than we assume. Simply adjusting our expectations, believing that others will act decently, can shift our behavior toward openness rather than suspicion. When individuals trust, societies cohere, and acts of generosity and pro-social engagement can become infectious. Therefore, individuals can elevate their mental health and societal well-being through deliberate acts of generosity. Research consistently shows that pro-social behavior, or volunteering, donating, or helping strangers, boosts mood and protects against depression. More strikingly, it reduces the so-called deaths of despair linked to hopelessness and societal breakdown. Generosity also operates as a counterforce to the selfishness that has spread through Trump contagion. When individuals give, whether time or resources, they embody the opposite values: empathy, solidarity, and responsibility for others. These acts do not only benefit others, but bring intrinsic fulfillment. Human beings are social animals, interconnected at every level. At scale, these actions build a culture where trust and kindness flourish, inoculating communities against demagogic appeals to fear and resentment. Donations to charities targeting depression or malnutrition in low-income countries can be over 100 times more impactful than average. By committing even 1% of one's income to evidence-based charities, individuals not only transform lives abroad, but also affirm a moral clarity that resists the noisy self-interest of the present age. What emerges from these strategies is a vision of mental health as more than an individual pursuit. In moments of political cynicism and social fragmentation, cultivating mental well-being becomes an act of civic responsibility. A healthy mind resists manipulation, seeks connection rather than division, and contributes to the flourishing of others. This reframing is critical. Too often, mental health is discussed in purely personal terms, something individuals must manage privately, perhaps with the help of therapy or medication. While these tools are essential for severe cases, they miss the broader dimension of caring for a population and preventing their falling ill in the first place. A society where individuals attend to their own well-being while also contributing to collective resilience will be far less vulnerable to authoritarian politics. Imagine, for instance, if schools integrated well-being practices into curricula, not as luxuries, but as essential for democratic participation. Or if workplaces prioritized employee connection and psychological well-being as much as productivity. Or if policymakers evaluated programs not only by economic outcomes, but by their bang for their buck in improving well-being. These cultural shifts would be qualitatively profound. These are the kinds of small, in fact costless, changes that fight the feelings of powerlessness that is precisely what authoritarianism feeds on. The antidote is to recognize that small, consistent choices are at any level accumulate to bring about a cultural change that lays the foundation for our flourishing together. It is easier than it may initially seem and more natural than what the Trump regime would have us believe. We just need to try it and keep trying until the momentum builds on itself.